cold as a razor blade, as tight as a tourniquet, like the skin on a dying man. I don't want a piece of the world. I want the whole world. I make my own rules because it's much easier that way. Trust me.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of The Snake Pit. But again, if you're watching us here on YouTube, that is not Jake the Snake Roberts sitting there with me. Nope, that is the legendary wrestler, WWE Hall of Famer, Gerald Brisco. Gerald, how you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing great, Marcus. Man, it's great to be on here and placing Jake when Jake's over a luxury vacation in the UK or Europe, wherever the hell his money can take him, and that's anywhere in the world. So, congratulations, Jake, being on vacation, and you better not be gone too long, or we might take over.
Man, you are more than a suitable substitute. I'm so thrilled to have you here, especially with your incredible history in wrestling. And recently, Gerald, one of the things that's a big landmark moment in your career was covered on Dark Side of the Ring. They were talking about Black Saturday. And man, I was hoping to dig into that story a little bit more with you here today and talk about Jake and all of those experiences in Georgia. So, brother, if you're ready, we got plenty of notes.
Well, I'm ready. I mean, it's like, that Montreal thing, you talk about it and you talk about it, and then all of a sudden, you don't want to talk about it anymore. But when a friend calls and wants to talk about it, I'll talk about it. So you got one of the last interviews I'm going to do on this Black Saturday.
Oh man, I really appreciate it. And the Dark Side of the Ring thing was really pretty comprehensive. They told a great story. But I guess the first thing I want to ask you before we get into all of it is, do you feel like you said anything that maybe wound up on the cutting room floor, or maybe they missed some parts of the story? Does anything stick out for you?
You always do, and you can't blame them. They got what, 53 minutes or 57, whatever the time limit is on it. So things are going to end up there, and your passion is not always the passion that the producer's trying to get across. And so I'm not pointing any fingers or upset about anything. I understand timing of a show. I understand that they got to get in a certain amount of things there, but there's always a few things, the so-called blood oath. I mean, it didn't happen exactly like it was portrayed on there. Jack, people that knew my brother, he wouldn't get color for anybody. I mean, I don't care. I mean, the biggest promoters in the world asked him to do it, and he said, "I don't do that." Eddie Graham told me to never do that. As Eddie Graham told me the same thing, don't ever do it, because the way you guys sell is more than convincing. You don't need a pool of blood to lay in to convince the people that you're hurt or upset. So, that part of it, where finally Jack just, okay, Ole, it's stupid. I mean, we're not 13-year-olds. We're not playing cowboys and Indians here. Or Polacks and Indians, as far as Ole was concerned there. But here's the deal. He took it. It's sort of like a blood test. If you're a diabetic, you just poke your finger and you put it up against something else. Ole was trying to gig himself with some rusted out and he didn't have a knife in his pocket. I'm sorry to the young man that said that, but he did not have a knife in the pocket. Matter of fact, we did find a knife, but I live out on an orange grove in Florida. I have a knife that I carried around that I peeled my oranges with, so I could see how the sweetest one. So we took that out, and Ole, his old rusted, beat up knife, and it dull as hell. And I got to give Ole credit; he was digging like crazy, but he finally found a little bit there. But Jack and I ended up pricking our fingers. But that's not the story. The story is that he accuses us of breaking the oath. What oath? I mean, we're grown up to, hear a word there, on paper, is good enough. But what the deal was, he would pay us X amount of dollars for the time and continue with his pay. And he stopped our payments and was claiming, well, the office didn't make any money. Okay, we can understand the office didn't make any money because of your booking, Ole. So out of that also, are you taking a pay cut? Well, hell no, I'm doing all the work, so I'm not going to take a pay cut. I said, well, if you're not taking a pay cut, then screw you, you're breaking your oath. So he was that was the biggest part of my complaint that they didn't get in. That Ole was the first one, and they said they had a quote from me saying Ole was the first one to break the oath on that. He broke his word first that that he would pay us, and then he quit paying us on the ground that there wasn't any money coming in the office. Well, if there's no money coming in the office, you're a good businessman and you're worried about the company not making any money. You're drawing 3 or 4 different salaries, which we didn't know at the time either. He was drawing because he was drawing. He intimidated Barnett, where Barnett was paying him for anything Ole wanted. I mean, and it was ridiculous after we dug into some of the payments Ole was getting. He was, I mean, and I don't blame Ole. Ole had a sweetheart deal there, and he was milking it for all he could get. But we reached a point where, okay, if you're making all this money, then the stockholders need to make some money too. We had stockholders that were old, and Paul Jones that was depending on that money coming in, and he wasn't getting a dime. Him and his wife was getting sick with Alzheimer's. He was on the early stages of dying himself, so they needed money for medical expenses. So they weren't getting any money, and none of the other stockholders were getting anything. So we of course lost our stipend that we agreed to with Ole, and Ole continued his pay. So Jack met with him in Baltimore. I think when Georgia ran Baltimore, it kind of invaded Vince's territory up there, and told Ole, "Hey Ole, if you're not going to take a pay cut, we're definitely going to do that. We got to make a move here." Oh, hold on. As Ole tried to talk Jack out of it, and Jack just shaking his head, "Okay, whatever." And we went on like that. So that was the biggest thing for me that they did not cover, because your word means a lot. And he said my word, I went back on my word when we weren't the first one to go back on the word. That was the biggest thing that I got. And as we're talking, I'm old and my memory will start jogging to more of the stuff that I felt that they left out.
Yeah, it's, more than anything, I like the idea of this being kind of like a companion piece for that
Yeah.
Dark Side of the Ring, where we're really kind of going to dig in and hopefully get some of the story that was missed on that Dark Side of the Ring, so fans can really get the full blown perspective. We'll start to talk about that here in a minute, but before we do, it's become really customary here on the show that anytime we've got a guest host, I ask them about their experiences around Jake. So, what can you tell us about first meeting Jake, experiences around him, etc.?
We traveled up and down the road here in Florida, in the Carolinas, and Georgia together, and the territories that we were running up in Ohio, Michigan, and West Virginia. Jake and I always were friends. I mean, I don't know if it goes back because I was good friends with Grizzly when I was first starting in the business, as was Jack, Grizzly being Jake's father, Grizzly Smith. And in Oklahoma, he was one of the guys really that got me watching weekly professional wrestling. They had one of the bloodiest riots they've been. The Kentuckians with Grizzly Smith and Big Boy Brown was the Kentuckians. We went to Kentucky, 2 big old boys that wore overalls against the masked assassins, Jody Hamilton and Tom Renesso. It was the biggest bloodbath feud I'd ever seen in my life. And it got me every Saturday night. And back in Oklahoma, that wrestling didn't come on until 12 o'clock at night. So you had to stay up real late to watch it. Or as you got home from being out late, you were watching it. I was a schoolboy at the time, and it really got me hooked on wrestling, along with my hero growing up. Danny Hodge was on there all the time. So, but yeah, so anyway, watching Grizzly, then meeting Jake, having a chance to travel around the road with Jake was a unique experience. I mean, we enjoyed our bad habits, smoking a little cannabis here and there, or a lot of cannabis there and here, however you want to put it. But we enjoyed each other's company. I love listening to Jake's stories. Jake's stories on the road was like Jake's promos. You just listen to them. I mean, you just bent over and you listen to them. Jake always had that unique ability to spin a story where he got your attention. So the road trip with Jake were really, really unique. I don't know if Jake ever told you this story, but when we were going through some problems in Georgia, and we were looking for a booker, I was on Barnett. I had a couple, Gary Hart and a couple other guys I was wanting to bring in as booker and relieve Ole of his duty because business wasn't sucking. We we're doing really good On the surface, it looked like we were doing good because we're hitting those 3 states, which nobody had hit in years and years, and we're doing bang out, sell out business up there. I was doing the promotion up there, and so we're making money. But the Georgia in general was sucking, and so we're looking for bookers. I was working Florida full time. Jake was working Georgia full time. I go up there, and they have me going over Jake in a match. And we'd talk to Jim Barnett. We being my brother Jack and myself, talked to Jim Barnett about a couple. Gary Hart was one of them, and Jake was the other, about being a booker. And well, yeah, but you can't let anybody know what you're doing. So I'm working with Jake. We're there. You couldn't talk to him in the dressing room because every ear in the dressing room was listening to what Jack, because they knew we were unhappy with the way the direction that Georgia Championship Wrestling was going. So couldn't talk in the dressing room or anywhere like that, or be seen out. So we're in the ring, 15, 16,000 people in the Omni that night. And I'm supposed to go over Jake. So we're working along, and I finally said, "Hey, Jake, would you like to be booker?" "What do you mean? Would you like to be booker in Ole and this territory and replace Ole or work with Ole?" "Well, I don't want to work with Ole, but I'd be glad to replace him." I said, "Okay, well, have your word? We'll talk later on." I said, "You got my word." I said, "Well, DDT me, beat me. But you're supposed to go over. You're supposed to go." I said, "I don't care. You're the booker. I'm putting you over tonight." So Jake DDT me, and 1, 2, 3, he won the match. We got back there. Of course, Ole hit the fan. "What the hell is going on out there, Brisco? You're supposed to be. You're coming back with Soto, blah, blah, blah." Said, no, we changed our mind out there. It was going so good. I felt that Jake should go over. And Ole threw up his hands. Whatever, he knew he couldn't win that battle. So, yeah, so I made Jake the booker in the ring and changed the finish where he beat me. I mean, how many times does that happen?
Man, what an experience for Jake. Hell of a night for him there in the Omni.
Yeah.
Man,
so that's my main event story with Jake Roberts.
that is so cool, and that is actually I was gonna play that clip of Jake telling that exact story. It's from February 5th, 1984.
Well, play it so I could hear it, because I never had that. I'd like to hear Jake's story.
Yeah, let's get Jake's account.
Sunday, the Omni always ran on Sunday. It was a big deal in Atlanta. And I look on the card, and I'm booked against Jerry Brisco. I'm
That's
like,
a good
holy
opponent.
shit, Jerry Brisco. What the hell am I doing wrestling him? I don't need to be doing jobs already. That's what I was thinking. So I'm kind of antsy about it, waiting to talk to him, and he's nowhere to be found. And the matches start. We're on 4th. He's nowhere to be found. Second match is over. He's nowhere to be found.
Oh, Lord.
Third match is in the ring. And just as it's over, I catch a glimpse of him running to get dressed. Well, they had me go to the ring. I went to the ring. The bell's ringing for him. He finally comes running out to the ring. We get in the ring. We start wrestling around, blah, blah, blah. Nothing, just doing our stuff. And we build the match. Got the heat going. He started making his comeback and told me to cut him off. And I'm like, cut you off? Because I thought he was taking it home. And I cut him off, and he said, DDT. What?
All right.
So I hook him, and I DDT him and cover him. And he says, do you want the job as booker? And I said, hell yeah. And he goes, don't take anything less than 100% control. Okay.
Wow.
And that's how it happened.
There it was. That's Jake's account.
That's awesome. But the reason he couldn't find me, I was in discussion to Barnett how I was going to pull this thing off. And Barnett and I were secluded back in the back office there where nobody could find us, because I wanted his attention, didn't want any interruptions. So that's the reason Jake couldn't find me. But that's a true story, man. Jake was nervous as hell, and I knew Jake wasn't really happy. He just come in. We promised him a push, and I'm coming in, and all of a sudden, I'm going over him. Well, number one, that wasn't right. And that's one thing I think you can look back with my brother and I. we were totally unselfish in the ring when it comes to that. We didn't care about winning and losing. We cared about drawing money. We knew that we would be coming back and we could put ourselves in a good position the next week and get that win back somehow, and big deal, you're going to lose to one of the top stars in the United States at the time, Jake Roberts. So it wasn't a big deal to me to do it. And Jack and I had talked about it, and I told Jack what I was going to do, and he really liked it because it was something that wasn't done very often, but yeah, that was a Jake. I've never worked for it. Jake, oh, are you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure. Beat me. You're the booker, but I got that out of him right before I let him beat me. Are you taking the job? If he would have said no, I can't. Then all right, I'm beating your ass.
Now, was part of having Jake pin you also kind of to go up Ole's ass sideways a little?
Exactly.
Oh, man, great stuff, and really cool to hear both of your accounts of the story. And I am curious too, Jake, from a worker standpoint, would you say that you were pretty impressed with him and his work rate?
Oh yeah, I'm highly impressed. I always thought Jake was one of the best damn workers. I mean, set the promos aside because I don't think there's too many people in our business ever that could cut a promo like Jake. But his work inside, whether he was babyface or heels, and he was one of those talented guys that could work either side of the coin. It didn't matter to him. Just put me in a position that I could draw you some money, and that I knew that if we treated Jake Roberts the right way, we could draw money with Jake.
Yep, and him being part of the Legion of Doom down there, the original Legion of Doom, I would say that was a money angle, and the stuff he was doing with Ronnie Garvin, man, a fun era in wrestling.
Yeah, it certainly was. I mean, we look back, and I mean, honestly, these kids today will look back and say, man, we had a great time, and good for them because they are. But in our mind, the old school guys like you and me and Jake and some of these others, what are they doing? It's hard to understand, but you can't criticize the money that they're drawing now. And so more power to them. I hope in 20 years, how many years it's been since that clip that they had as good a time as my brother and I and Jake and the guys in the business.
Yeah, it's incredible, but that's 40 years ago this year that you and Jake had that match, and the Black Saturday happened.
Damn, Jake is old.
Man, I'm glad I get to get these stories from you guys because it's incredible hearing them. So the other guy I wanted to ask you about, and then we'll start to talk about Black Saturday a little bit more, is Ted DiBiase. He had come into the territory during this period of time. And man, Ted, you could make the argument was one of the best wrestlers on the face of the planet during this era. And here he is in a pretty small territory with Georgia. What do you remember about being around Ted at this time?
Well, Teddy's another one of those guys that I had the privilege of knowing for a long, long time. Working West Texas a lot, where Teddy grew up and everything. So I was around him and his father, and so it was always a pleasure to be with Teddy. And I got a great story with Teddy, as I do just about all the guys. Teddy would moaning and groaning. He had a cauliflower ear. I don't know if he ever told you this story. He had a cauliflower ear. So he was going to go to a doctor's appointment. Well, my brother Jack and I were amateur wrestlers. We dealt with cauliflower ear. I knew how to drain a cauliflower ear, and so I said, Teddy, don't pay $60 to a doctor. I said, we can drain your ear. And I mean, that baby was out here. And see, he still got the remnants of it now. That baby was sticking out here, squishy as could be. So I knew it'd be easy to drain. So let's go by one of the drugstores, pick up a syringe and some cotton and some peroxide to sterilize the alcohol to sterilize, burn like hell after you poke the hole in there. And I said, let's do that, and we'll go back to your apartment and drain your ear, because his wife was out of town or something. So we were going to stay there because we had an early, like a 6 o'clock plane the next morning. He lived out by the airport. So he said, you guys can stay with us. So we get to his apartment. We go get all the materials and everything. We get to his apartment. The apartment's locked and the keys are inside. His wife is gone. So we had to break into his own apartment. We break it and knock out in the kitchen window, Get in the damn apartment, get in there, get a couple of cubes of ice, put up on his ear. Okay, it should be ready now. So I stick the needle in there, and Teddy's crying like a little baby. I mean, I heard that, Teddy, shut up. Jack giving him hell too. I drained it. Man, it's a big syringe about this big, full of that old red pussy like blood that comes out of the cauliflower ear. So, but we'd forgot one thing. We'd forgot the little cast. So when you drain an ear, if you don't put a little cast on it, and all that is some gauze and some sticky stuff that'll turn it hard. We forgot to pick that part up. So I said, just put this cloth up again. I put some ice. I put this cloth, and maybe it won't drain back in there. But sure enough, the next morning it drained back in there. And he looked, he started screaming early in the morning. You hear, yeah, look at my ear. I thought you drained this stuff. And he went through all that pain last night. So what a big ass baby Ted DiBiase was over draining cauliflower. So that's the deal with Teddy. That's how he got that big ass cauliflower. And they walked around. He was real proud of it after a while because getting cauliflower was a big deal.
Right. It was like a rite of passage, right?
Yeah.
Man, I cannot wait to ask Ted about it. There's a reason he hasn't relayed that story to me. So.
Yeah, because he's a baby.
All right, fellas out there, blink if you haven't purchased a Father's Day gift yet. Yep, we thought so. Today's episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Hey, maybe your pops has been rocking that bush since the 70s, and that's okay. Our friends at Manscaped have crafted the total package for his special day. Whether it's the boys downstairs, his beard, or even the best pair of underwear out there, Manscaped has got the bases covered. Head over to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping with code SNAKEPIT. From daddy to zaddy, trust Manscaped. You know, as men get older, his hair starts popping up in funny places and getting thicker, and before you know it, dad is looking like that dad from Teen Wolf. Well, it's time to hook dad up. You know that beard trimmer that your dad's been using since you were in grade school? Yeah, probably needs an upgrade. Introducing the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, the complete beard maintenance kit for all bearded kings. This all-in-one kit comes with a beard hedger, Manscaped's most advanced beard trimmer, as well as shampoo, conditioner, oil, and balm for his beard. It also comes with a brush, comb, and scissors so he can style his beard and mustache like the true gentleman he is. No beard kit would be complete without Manscaped's Handyman Face Shaver. For that smooth finish we know he loves, this bad boy is all he needs. Compact enough to fit in any travel case, make sure he takes this on his next trip. If your pops is starting to look like a Sasquatch with all that body hair like so many dads do, you're in luck with the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. This bad boy is designed with fathers in mind, featuring the signature Lawnmower 5.0. This Father's Day is also the perfect time for your old man to stop stealing his wife's nail clippers and finally have a kid of his own that will last him a lifetime. The Shears 3.0 is the 5-piece precision male's nail grooming kit that any father needs to stay on top of his self-care with professional-grade stainless steel tools sized and styled for the task at hand. We mentioned underwear earlier. That set of underwear that he got for Christmas a decade ago definitely needs an upgrade. And what better way than with Manscaped's Boxers 2.0? The Boxers 2.0 were designed with the simple mission to make the most comfortable boxers a man could buy. It starts with the Jewel Pouch, a dedicated space that cradles your stones in place with a perforated performance fabric for extra breathability. Guys, don't waste any more time. Father's Day is going to be here before you know it. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code SNAKEPIT at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use our code SNAKEPIT. Never forget where you came from, if you know what I mean. Happy Father's Day from us here at the Snake Pit and from Manscaped. Oh, man, that's great. And, man, he and Tommy Rich had a hell of a feud during that era in Georgia, and they did that Mr. R angle and some stuff with Brad Armstrong, Bullet Bob Armstrong. Just, man, what a great generation.
You know how Brad got over. You know the story with Brad, right? You know,
What's
how Brad really became a star there in Georgia. Brad was starting to get over. He needed a push. And this shows here another unselfish moment of Jack Brisco. Jack's the world champion. So Jack said, let me take that kid. And so, because he loved Bob so much, and he loved Brad a lot. And so they went out and they had a match, and it was like a 15-minute match. They were setting Brad up for a title match with Jack later on. This was a non-title TV match, of course, on TBS. And So Jack's out there, and I mean, he's putting this kid over like the guys Harley Race or Dory Funk Jr. I mean, he's putting him over. That match ended up having the highest numbers of any segment on WTBS history for years and years and years. I don't know how many years that record had, but that immediately made Brad Armstrong that he was able to go that 15-minute draw with the world champion. And 2 weeks later, the Omni had 17,000 people in there, sold out with Jack Brisco and Brad Armstrong in his first title match there. So what a night that was.
Wow, that's incredible. I had
Yeah.
no idea that was part of
Yeah.
Brad Armstrong's history. That's great.
Yeah.
Man, well, Ted all the time sings the praises of you and your brother on our podcast. Everybody's got a pod, and
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, we were just talking about your brother about 10 minutes before I got on here with you because I was telling him how I'm about to record with you, and he said, "Boy, Jack and Jerry, two of the best ever." And he said Jack Brisco had one of the best matches I've ever seen against Dory Funk Jr.
Oh, that match. I mean, that match should be one of those matches where if you're breaking into the business, you should be a rule that you have to sit down and you watch this 60, 40, 45, 45, 60-minute match, whatever the length of it is, and study that match before you ever step foot in the ring, because those two were technicians. They had the magic ingredient with each other. People really don't know what it is, and the talent really don't know what it is, but you just know when you step in the ring with certain guys, you have that magic with. And Dory and Jack had that magic. That match was actually one of the first ones in a long, long time. I want to say first ever, but one in the first long time that's ever syndicated around the market, around the United States. They ended up showing that in like 25 or 35 different markets across the United States. And Jack and Dory were only working this was pre-title, they only working Florida and Amarillo at the time before this match hit. Then when this match hit nationwide, they were booked in every territory in the world after that. So just off that 60-minute match they had. But that's a classic match that everybody should watch. I'm sure that's one that Teddy saw. And I know Teddy saw hundreds of them too.
Well, now I'm gonna go hunt that match down. I'm sure it's on YouTube, and I'd
Yeah.
love to see it. Well, let's get into the whole Black Saturday situation. Vince bought Southwest Championship Wrestling's time slot from the Blanchard family in 1983 as Joe Blanchard's territory folded up. Do you remember if there was any reaction to this acquisition? Like, what was the general temperature of everybody around wrestling?
I remember really that, and you know, at that time it wasn't really thought of as something really earth-shattering, but Eddie Graham, the brilliant promoter down here in Florida, Eddie knew that was going to be the key to something in our business that none of the promoters at the NWA couldn't control, and that's cable TV. Cable TV is going to be the demise of this business. Not an individual, not anybody else. Cable TV. And so when that happened, and nobody knew how long the USA market or USA network was going to last, because those networks were popping up. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but networks like that were popping up and going out of business, you know, right and left. So all of them were trying to be Ted Turner, basically. And Ted had that magic about him that he made it work, but a lot of them didn't. So when Vince pulled in and into that time slot there, it wasn't really like, oh man, this is the first nail in the coffin. There weren't thoughts like that. It's just, you know, what's going on. But it's a few guys, Eddie Graham, being around Eddie Graham gave my brother and I so much insight to beyond the normal talent mindset that Eddie would give us, and teach us the inside, the goings and comings of the business. And Eddie, I got to sing Eddie's praises. He's the one that really taught Jack and I how to be businessmen in professional wrestling. He could kind of see what was coming, but a lot of the other guys were just totally blind on what was going on.
Man, Eddie Graham, everybody always puts him over as being one of the sharpest guys ever in wrestling. And for him to kind of be able to project that and see that, okay, Vince is looking like he's making moves in cable and, you know, trying to capture these television opportunities, like that could be the demise of wrestling. Pretty impressive that he was able to kind of foresee all that.
Yeah, he was. And he was like, there was an article in the Tampa Tribune that somebody posted not long ago on a Facebook page that before any of these SLs ever come across, Eddie was saying, it's not the promoter next door that you've got to worry about. It's that one that 2,000 miles away that you don't know who the hell he is, that gets TV, that gets his cable TV. And Eddie was singing the praises and the demise of the territories back before cable TV really expanded. So he saw it actually. He saw the concept, what was going on, and he knew that was going to be the downfall of it. But yeah, Eddie had that one eye, and Eddie cocked that head to the side, and you could just see that everything churning inside his head. And man, you knew you needed to sit down and start listening to what this man was going to say, because he was a wealth of information.
Was there ever a time, because Vince is also acquiring a lot of talents across territories. So between that and these television opportunities he's acquiring, was there ever a time when you yourself thought, like, geez, maybe I ought to go see if I can work in New York?
Yeah, well, I you know what? Honestly, neither Jack and I had any desire to go to New York. I mean, Jack was approaching the end of his career, and Jack wasn't really wanting to work anything. Jack kind of hung on that last year just to kind of help position me, and because they knew I had a couple of years left. But I like a lot of people went to college. I had an exit plan coming in this business, man. I was 10 years. I was going to get out. I was going to finish my last year of college and be a teacher or coach. That was my lifelong ambition, to be a coach, a high school or college wrestling coach. And so I had that exit plan. I'd already been in business 15 or 16 years, whatever it was at that time. So but I saw guys leaving. We're starting to lose a lot of guys. We'd lost Sarge. We'd lost several other guys that made the jump up there. But the one that really, really, to me, was the tipping point of the whole buyout deal. And Vince wasn't coming in and buying these guys. He was stealing these guys. He was offering them good money. And, guys, like guys up at Vern, what he stole all my talent. But, if you've been paying these guys right to begin with and treating them right, and there's no way if you're making good money on a territory where you're working 4 or 5 times a week that you're going to go and work 100 days in a row for Vince McMahon unless he's paying you the money. So that's the reason guys were jumping to Vince McMahon, because he was not only giving them opportunity to be nationwide, but he's giving them that opportunity to make that huge money that they weren't making other places. So, but as I was saying, the guys were going left and right. Hogan and all these guys were already up there. All of a sudden, when we lost Hot Rod Roddy Piper to Vince, that's when Jack and I were making a car ride somewhere. And Roddy had come to our hotel room the night, a couple of weeks before, and asked us not to tell anybody, but he had made his deal with Vince. And we started, because Roddy was hot in Georgia. He was our bread and butter in Georgia. And Georgia spawned off to Michigan, Ohio, and West Virginia, where we're selling out every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Roddy was also over in the Carolinas, where Jack and I were working steady. So that was another straw there that that made that territory so phenomenal during that time frame there. If you go back to Starrcade and look at the card, there are probably 13 to 14 WWE Hall of Famers on that Starrcade card. Mm-hmm. And out of all those guys that left, the Valentine, the Slaughters, the one who left, Roddy Piper, was actually the tipping point. That's when Jack and I got in the car later and said, "Man, we got to think of something. Let's think of our exit plan. Let's think how we can get out of this bill."
How important do you think that the Superstation was to the success of the Georgia territory? Could it have been as successful without it?
Well, the Georgia proper, it would have been. I mean, because you had your main TV and you had a powerful TV. And plus, back in those days, you had what you called your syndicated TV, too. You had your Columbus, Georgia TV, individual TV. You had your Macon TVs. You had your Savannah TVs. So off that Georgia TV, we would syndicate our show where it was all over Georgia. So, for Georgia's sake, it was good because it was a new station and everybody's going to watch new, and they had bought the rights to Andy and Bayberry, which was at the time, it sounds funny, but it was the #1 show in the United States, Bayberry, USA, whatever the hell of the name was, until Georgia Championship Wrestling came on. all of a sudden Georgia Championship Wrestling started drawing bigger numbers because of the talent Barnett was bringing in. So I don't think the cable really had that much to do with the attraction of the territory of Georgia, but it did for our expansion. And the only reason we were able to go into this Michigan, Ohio, and West Virginia, it was a dead area. It was a dead spot. No promoters were in there. She could gone in there and burnt the place up and walked out of there. One thing Ole was really right about, and he said they don't know what how the business operates. Well, you had to pay your money in advance. I go in and try to set up a building. I'd like to work with you guys, but I'm gonna need every bit of my money up front because we were burned by the last wrestling promoter. So we had to dig into our well. We had to dig into that till and pay all that money up. But buildings, after you rent them 2 or 3 times, they begin to trust you and see that you're operating your business above board the way business should be operated in. And those advance charges went away because you usually drew enough money and they trusted that you were going to draw enough money that night to pay all your expenses. So you didn't have all those advance expenses like you did in the beginning. And Odie, you always use that as well, they were dumbasses. They didn't know what the expenses to work in these. Our only expenses were getting guys there. That first night usually paid for all those expenses that we did. And then we had another 6, 7 nights to make the profit for the company, which we did.
Wow.
So that the cable helped us advance and start a slow migration out of Georgia into territories. And Barnett was really strict. You cannot run a town where there's a promoter currently running. So we get those big sacks of where cable TV was penetrating, and we had to really select here, around, and really around Pittsburgh, because that little peninsula of panhandle of West Virginia goes up, and I mean any TV you have is going to bleed over in the Pittsburgh area almost. So we had to be very careful of the wheelings and the little towns in West Virginia we were running. So you had to be very careful that there wasn't any other promoters there, because Jim was very loyal to NWA at that time, and we had to really be select on the towns that we were running, which was a group effort to do that.
What can you tell us about the relationship between Georgia Championship Wrestling and Turner? Would you say that Turner was really passionate about it?
I'd say Turner was overly passionate about it. There's stories, and we're not the only ones, but we did. I think it was 101 Techwood Avenue, the old GTS, WGTS TV studio on Saturday morning, which made it horrendous because you're in Atlanta, Georgia on Friday night, and you're young. You want to go out and experience Atlanta, Georgia, but you had to be up at 6:30 the next morning and be at TV at 7 o'clock in the morning to do our TV. So it was brutal at times. I mean, the Dusties and the Pipers and the Briscoes, we all be out partying. We'd all stumble into the studio about 7 o'clock in the morning, still hung over and still half of them unbathed, And so it was a really difficult deal. But we're so many of us in there. We're dressed in the halls. One time Turner came down. He knew Jack and I, and he knew our college background. He saw us dressed in the hallways. He, come here, guys. He said, "This is my office. You can use it as long as you don't trash it. So when you leave here, make sure it looks just like when you come in here." So he allowed us to use his personal office during our TV taping times. And we made sure nobody else went in there. We made sure it was spick and span when we went out. But he had a passion for the wrestlers. He respected every one of the wrestlers, whether they were the first guys on the card or doing the job for the top talent. He respected everybody and treated us with total class. I got nothing but good things to say about Turner.
Now, as a shareholder for the company, you're balancing duties with being a wrestler as well. What would your day-to-day activities look like as a shareholder on top of being a wrestler?
Well, mostly, and at that time, Jim Barnett was a hands-on owner. Jim was doing everything. As for the business side of it, the talent side of it, of course, we were recruiting talent to come there. Everywhere we go, Jack was coming off his title win, so we're fortunate enough to be booked in a lot of these different territories. We'd see guys like Rocky Johnson. Rocky was serving up in Portland, Oregon. Guys, I need to get out here. Can you get up? So Jack got him booked in Georgia and then to Florida. So we were out on the road scouting talent, and then we would brainstorm with Jim and whoever the booker. And Ole wasn't always the booker there. Sometimes it's Bill, sometimes it's other guy. And we also had wanted Gary Hart in there. So we'd sit down and brainstorm who how to book our TV and stuff like that. So it was kind of a shotgun effect. You did what was needed to do in a small company like that.
Apparently Vince had come to Turner previously trying to buy the time slot, and Turner refused. What did you make of that? Just, was his judgment clouded by his love for wrestling, or did he
Yeah.
have some kind of a personal issue?
Well, we were certainly aware of that. Who personal issue, Vince or Turner?
Did Turner maybe have a personal issue with Vince where he
No,
just didn't
I
want to
don't
go?
think he really even knew that much about Vince at the time, but he was so loyal and so infatuated with Georgia Championship Wrestling. He loved the live wrestling studio. He loved that old school TV. I mean, that's obvious, his station was built on the old classic TV shows too. He saw us as one of those old school shows. And he knew what the New York group was, bells and whistles and all that stuff. And he was attracted so heavily into Georgia Championship Wrestling that in my opinion, he didn't. That's what he wanted to be with old school TV. He didn't care about the perception of bells and whistles. He just didn't care.
You talked to us a little bit about the circumstances surrounding your decision to sell to Vince, and if fans want to hear more about that, I encourage you to go listen to that Dark Side of the Ring episode, so you guys can really kind of get the full context on it. But did the deal come together with Vince pretty easily, or was there a lot of back and forth, before you came to an agreement?
Well, there was a lot of back and forth. I mean, we met, and that's the amazing thing about it. And as you know, in the wrestling business, if you can keep a secret from people in our wrestling business, man, you have accomplished a lot. And Jack and I, we knew who our friends were, and even our closest friends, like Roddy Piper, when Roddy made his decision to sell to jump, and that's what made us, like I said before, make that decision to sell. But we'd gone in and we made a couple of mistakes along the way. I mean, this wasn't just a deal to go to Vince McMahon. We come in and we were going to, like I said, we tried to make Jake the booker. Well, we wanted to make Gary Hart the booker and drop Ole because business was not great. It was great in like I said, in those outer areas because it was a brand new area for us. It was great there, granted, and we were drawing money like crazy. But in Georgia, and the reason, and one of your questions, I saw we had such a plethora of young talent, of young, good-looking guys. You asked, why did you have all that talent pool like that? Barnett knew what it took. I mean, Barnett ran Australia for 5 to 10 years. He made that company down there thrive on bringing in fresh talent every 3 or 4 months, bringing in young, athletic guys, and that's what Jim brought that same MO when he came into Georgia. We'll bring in young, athletic guys for our TV. So that's really what made it go there. So what was that? What was the question I was trying to get?
Oh, it was, let me get back to it. It was the deal. It came together fairly
Oh yeah.
easily.
So it wasn't an easy deal. Even when we finally made the call, and the unique thing about it, we called Vince from Jimmy Crockett Jr.'s office because Roddy Piper had been hurt. And Roddy kept saying Roddy Piper was a dear friend of ours. He had his fingers slashed when he went to pick up a table. They didn't file the inside of that little metal down, and he severed all of his fingers. We'd heard rumors that he was going to lose his fingers. So everybody were doing TV interviews at Crockett Promotion, and everybody wanted to know about Piper. We had no answer, so we walk in, and Jimmy called Vince and find out if Piper's okay. That's all. Just you don't have to share your secrets with him, but just find out if Piper's okay. I ain't calling that son of a bitch. I ain't calling him. Jack said, do you mind if I call him? Jimmy said, here, go ahead and call him. So Jack picked up. Jimmy had his number called. Howard Finkel answered the phone, put Jack right to Vince. Vince started questioning Jack where he was at. And Jack said, I'm at TV we're here in Crockett's office. Well, you can't talk now. He said, all you got to do is just say yes or no. Or would you guys be interested in meeting with me? And Jack said, sure. And he said, well, call us when you leave TV and we'll work something out. So we thought it was just going to be an offer to come up there and work, not. So Jack got on the phone. He said, "Hey, I'd love to have you guys up there. However, are you guys interested in selling your territory?" So we actually made the call right in front of Jimmy Crockwood, we called it. But we'd also done some due diligence because, like I said, we didn't do everything perfect. We made a lot of mistakes leading into it. We tried to do a little takeover before. And then our bylaws, and it's a portion that we did study our bylaws and got caught on this. When you called a stockholders meeting, you had to state a reason why you're calling that stockholders meeting. Well, we couldn't call a stockholders meeting to say we're going to vote Ole out, because you got to do that like a month in advance. I'd given Ole too much time to call everybody else and say, "Hey, the Briscoes are high on pot or whatever," and don't listen to them. They don't know what they're doing. So we tried to do it without stating the status of the reason why we're having. So that meeting got called off, and that it cost both Jack and I a lot of money with the lawyers and stuff like that. So, we kind of dropped it for a while and kind of let that flame go down a little bit so we wouldn't be thinking about it. So finally, we knew from there. We didn't know Ole Anderson was a stockholder at the time. We just thought Ole was an employee. And that's what really saved us. So, because when we made the sale, the big deal was it wasn't offered to anybody else. But we'd read those stockholder bylaws when we made the mistake about not calling it, and it said in there that before you can sell your stock, you got to offer it to a existing stockholder. And so as we're going along, all of a sudden we find out Ole Anderson owned 10% of the territory. He bought it from Bill Watts. And I talked to Bill Watts not long ago, right before this dark side thing come on. And I thanked Bill. I said, "Bill, if it hadn't been for you, that whole deal would have blown up right in our face again." And so he said, "Well, you're welcome." So anyway, when we found out that, we offered Jimmy Crockett, we offered it to Barnett, we offered it to an existing stockholder, we offered it to his business partner, Jim Oates, and we offered it to Paul Jones. 3 guys that we knew that wouldn't buy it. So we fulfilled our obligation of pursuing an insider stock sale, and it didn't go through. So then that opened us up to sell. We went to Jimmy Crockett, went to Joe and Elliot Murnick and Carl Murnick, who was running Virginia and Richmond, Raleigh for Crockett. Offered them the same deal, would you willing? And they let us check it out. So they would call Ole, they're wanting too much money for it. It's not worth that. It's not worth it. That was always it. It's not worth that kind of money if they're offering. They're trying to rip you guys off. One more. Why are you hanging on to them? How are you making all this money? So anyway, we finally made that. We left TV. We called Crockett. He said, "When you guys are," I called Vince. "When you guys are off?" And Jack looked at the calendar. We're off next Thursday. He said, "How about I fly you up to New York and we sit down, we talk about it, and it'll be 100% private. Nobody will know it. You and I ever talked to." We agreed to meet with Vince up there. So that's how we went up to Vince, went up to New York, met in LaGuardia Airport, one of the little Delta or Eastern at the time executive rooms that they used to rent out for meetings and everything. Met in there for a couple hours. Really liked Vince and what he had to say and his vision on the business, because he kind of laid out his vision of the business, which are really some of the same stuff that he was laying out with what Jack and I visualized in our mind too. So we knew that if we sold, we were selling to a guy that kind of had the like vision of what we thought the business should be eventually. And I mean, he went into detail, and the way he went into detail, 99% of it all came to fruition. The guy had a vision, he stuck with it. So then we get back, we set up the meeting. So then we got to contact our attorney. So we contact our attorney. He sets up a meeting, and then it's all done through attorneys at that time there. So they contact Vince's attorney. So we set up a time to meet in Atlanta. We go in, we dissect the bylaws. I mean, just dissect them down to the last little syllable and a word, and to make sure that what we did had no legal boundary where we could get called back on it. Oh, and like I said, Ole tried to sue and stop the sale, but he had done screwed up when he bought Bill Watts' stock without it being offered to Jack or I or to anybody else in the company. And so we had to, after we agreed with Vince, we could get the 51%. Then we had to make calls and make sure they're sworn to secrecy on the other stockholders that we knew we could count on. Of course, Barnett was no issue at all, and Oates was no problem at all. The big deal would come to Paul Jones, the old school promoter there that had been the figurehead promoter there forever. And so we got to Paul, and Paul was a former college athlete, and his wife a former collegiate athlete also. She really liked Jack and I. I mean, the Joan, because of our college background, our athletic background, and because she really respected us and liked us. And they weren't making any money. I mean, it'd been years since they'd seen a dividend check. And we're getting to the point here now where Ole, by his own admission, business was sucking, and we couldn't bring in the quality of talent that we were able to bring in before the stars from other places where we're going. So we're having to depend on our own talent. That's why Tommy Rich got so hot, because we had to focus on Tommy Rich and build him to be a star. So we weren't really making it. Been, like I said, it'd been years since the Joneses had any deal. So we got their proxy. So that hit it, man. That hit us well over 50, and I think even like 61% we had at that time. So we knew even if one guy had dropped out, we'd still have the 51%. You know, as long as Joneses didn't drop out, we'd be cool on it. So they agreed to it. Then we sat down in hours and hours, and I got to tell you, Linda McMahon was the best negotiator I ever sat across the table with. She was the one really doing the negotiation. And Vince kind of sat there and just shook his head and said, yeah, whatever she said. You know. So it was really Linda who did the negotiation for her. But the bottom line is we were able to contact all these people, do all this legwork, fly in and out of Atlanta 3 or 4 times with Vince and Linda. And nobody, I mean, nowadays, I mean, you couldn't get by with you that. I don't know how you could do it, but nobody in the business knew what was coming down. And that's what I think I'm most proud of, that we were able to keep that so under the table for a period of probably 6 to 7 months before we made the deal.
Man, you said it earlier in the podcast. This is a tough business to keep a secret in. So well done, especially a secret that big. Holy smokes, incredible. Now, did you know before Vince came on TV and made his infamous appearance on WTBS that was part of his plan?
Well, we knew what it was. We knew what his plan was because we, sitting there during negotiation, we're laying out. I mean, he's laying out his plan, and we gained his confidence. Where, of course, he knew we had everything to lose, and if it would have got out, we would have been more mincemeat than he would have been. I mean, the NWA was our bread and butter, and our stock. We own part of Florida, and we own part of Georgia. Through just blessings that we had to cash at the time it was available, and we were able to jump on it. But he laid out his vision, how he wanted to go nationwide and everything. And we helped him. George Scott was the first booker. We called George Scott from our final meeting there, and we helped him sign George Scott on. He was wanting Gordon Soley so bad, and Gordon, I gotta give Gordon credit. He was loyal to the NWA and loyal to the Georgia Championship, and Gordon said, "No, I'm not going to do it." And I also got to give Gordon credit, or Gordon didn't share that phone call with anybody else until after it was over with, And Gordon could have easily broke the deal right there. Well, the Briscoes are, because it was a week after we signed the agreement that Vince showed up in Atlanta. It was a couple of weeks after that. So we're very fortunate that it didn't get out. And I hate the fact that Ole used it. Well, they did it when my mother was dying, and that really paints us. We didn't know Ole's mother. We knew that she was ill, and we knew, but the deal, any businessman knows when the final deal gets done, you do it then, or you miss out on the opportunity. So that day come, and unfortunately, it was a time where Ole's mother had passed away. We felt bad about it, and called Ole and expressed our condolences, but that wasn't meant to be the timing or anything that we did. It just coincided with an unfortunate date.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that he lost a member of his family, but here you and Jack, who've invested money yourselves, and you guys are trying to take care of your families.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's you've got to do what you've got to do. Now, when Black Saturday came and went, I know that you mentioned on the program that yourself and your brother received some threatening phone calls. Were these calls from fans or were they from some wrestlers and promoters as well?
Both.
Wow. Okay. Anybody any notable names stick out as far as a wrestler who may have called and threatened
Well,
you?
Paul Jones, the wrestler, we met Paul Jones from Paul Jones, the wrestler, is kind of the one, and and Louise and the deal where we said Paul said he's putting a hitman out on us, and Louise, they asked Louise, "Do you think?" And she said, "No, Ole would have done it." So, she's right. I don't think Ole would have, but it's good fodder. I mean, Paul Jones called my brother Jack. You guys watch out where you go, who you're hanging with, because supposedly in 3 days you'll be dead. But one thing, Joe Laurinaitis, Animal on Road Warrior, we did our duty. We finished up every date that we were booked for Georgia and every date that we were booked for Crockett, and did jobs. Did put everybody over. We're working with the Road Warriors in Cleveland, the old Cleveland Auditorium. It's on the stage, and a Road Warrior. We're on the Road Warriors. They're on one side of the stage. We're on now. One of the Road Warriors gives a come here, I got to talk to you. So, Jack, what the hell? So he motioned, we go back behind 3 sets of curtains all the way to the back end up. He said, I got to tell you guys something. He said, you guys have always treated us good. We have a bunch of respect for you as you do for us. And then he said, but Ole's offered everybody in the dressing room $5,000 if he'll break your arm or leg. We kind of looked. He said, well, what do you guys, who we're working with, what do you guys tell them? They said, we don't want no part of it. We respect you guys. You guys have been too good to us, and we appreciate that. And he said, I got to tell you, if you're ever in the ring with Buzz Sawyer before you leave, watch it, because he said he would do it. And we kind of laughed. Well, good luck on that, Buzz. So Joe, who I trusted 100%, and I think he had no reason to lie to me in any way, shape, or form. I do believe that happened, and of course, Buzz isn't around to verify his end of it, so I'm not going to bash a dead man. But it wouldn't shock me that he did say he would do it. But we used to play game with Buzz and make him throw up, so we knew we'd buzz him so bad that he couldn't even breathe. He'd go over the corner and throw up on the ring apron, because he just couldn't hang. I mean, if you're going to break somebody, you better be able to hang with them before you try to break somebody's leg or arm.
I know he was supposed to be a shooter or something, but man,
Supposed to be. Well, he was a tough guy. I mean, there ain't no doubt about it. But was he a Jack Brisco category? No, and he wasn't close to mine either. Patting myself on the back.
I was going to do it, so I'm
But he
glad you did.
was a tough son of a gun, though.
Well, this will be my last question, then I'll let you go, my friend. When he didn't get the reaction that he hoped for on WTBS, Vince sold the time slot for $1 million and used that money to fund WrestleMania, as we all know. At the time, did you have any inkling that WrestleMania was going to become the global event that it did?
No, it was shortly after that he called me and asked me to jump on board and help him promote some southern cities, because he couldn't get into the southern cities. Because the building manager, they were a tight-knit group too, and they had worked with the NWA, and they were getting 52 weeks out of the year booking in their cities. So then you got this guy coming in and saying, they'll offer you 2 to 4 events a year opposed to 52. Who you going to stay loyal to? You're going to stay loyal to that 52. So he needed somebody local that had a relationship with the building manager. And one thing I got to say too, that Barnett and Crockett's all respected my brother and I, and once again it's because of that background, being college wrestlers and all that BS, that we were always introduced to the building managers, the high rollers that were coming that night. We were the guys that always did the meet and greet with those guys. So I had formed a relationship with all the building managers in the South here. So when Vince needed help to get into those buildings, Barnett told him, well, Brisco's well thought of by all these building managers. And at last, there was syndication, if a building manager here, there was a group of guys would be a building manager here, and all the southern states, they all kind of jump from after you get 5 years in this building, you get 4 or 5 in this building, you jump. So there was that chain and there was that organization where they knew us. So once you got your foot into one building, you lived up to your agreements there. And I told Vince, we can't get these buildings offering 2 shows. We got at least minimum 4 and probably 6 shows in some of them. So I went in with the aspect, of course, I promised them 8 instead of 6. And then as we got near the time, I ended up getting those 8 shows for them, opposed it. But they eventually, the buildings come to us. So that's the reason we're down here. We only had not a lot of buildings promoted WrestleMania because we couldn't get into a lot of them. So he was still fighting that when he got it and when he did WrestleMania. But those venues that we did have, they all did great, for WrestleMania 1.
Man, Mr. Brisco, I cannot thank you enough for joining us here on the program. Incredible insight and such a cool, again, companion piece to that Dark Side of the Ring episode. Really great to get the full story. And I want you to be able to tell more of your stories to our listeners. Where else can they find you?
Well, Brisco and Bradshaw, that big old Texas, long-legged Texan, I like to give grief to every week. We put out a little podcast, story, Brisco and Bradshaw. They drop every Thursday morning everywhere you get your podcast. We just have a good time, just like Jake and you guys do. We all have a good time. We try to stay away from the dark side of anything and just talk on the positive, because John's a very positive person. And as you know, I'm a very positive person. I got no time. I'm 77, almost 78 years. I got no time for negative stuff, for negative people. So, we try to stay away from the people that we know that would have an axis to grind, and we don't go in that direction. And we just tell fun road stories, the ribs. I mean, those sand hats, and would you run over it with the truck? No, I didn't run over it with the truck. Well, how did you run? I ran over it with my tractor. Okay. So we get the truth out of these guys. Well, we just tell fun stories on guys and let them share their stories. They're sitting in that back seat was the learning seat of any car trip back in my hair. So,
man, guys, go out of your way to listen to their stories. It is an incredible podcast. I've listened to it myself. It's Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. Again, you can find it on all podcast platforms or on YouTube. And do you have merch selling anywhere?
No, I don't, and that's something John and I probably need to get into eventually. But we at this point here, we just hadn't got into it. We're trying to focus on delivering a great podcast and figuring out how to be like Jake and make a lot of money from podcasts.
Well, maybe you and I can talk about that a little bit off air once we wrap this
Love
thing
to.
up. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week. Again, Mr. Brisco, can't thank you enough. This was incredible. I love getting to pick your brain.
Well, Marcus, thank you. And this is, I mean, you do a lot of these things, and you get a lot of questions there. What the hell does that question mean? But when you sent me the list of what we're going to discuss here, they all made sense, and they all rhymed in. They all followed that Dark Side of the Ring, which I got to say it's very, very good. In the beginning, I had my doubts about working with those people just strictly because of the name of the like I said, we're positive people, and I don't want to deal with the dark side of anything. So they know me. When they call me, they're going to get the same little spiel I give them. Hey, I'm not going to do anything negative. If you're looking for a negative shit, go on to the next guy. And they've been very good for me. They kept their word, and they just signed for a season 6 here. So I'm going to be appearing on several of those volumes also. So tune in to them. They're great.
There you go, guys. Tune into that and tune into the Snake Pit next week.
That's it.
We'll see you guys next time.